Hi, my name is Haley, and this is Moon Brews. Hello everybody, welcome back to Moon Brews. Today's episode is so exciting. I'm covering the Salem Witch Trials, and it's just something that I've always wanted to cover and really dive into, and I learned so much during this episode, and I hope you do as well. But before we get into that, I do have a book recommendation. I just finished Brady Hendricks' My Best Friend's Exorcism. It is like, the setting is like the 80s. It gives you like 80s high school vibes, and honestly, just your best friend needing an exorcism. It is so good. It gives you like this nostalgic feel, even though I never grew up in the 80s, but it brings you right back to high school and like the cliques and all of that stuff. But there's a ghost involved and there's a possession, but it's still lighthearted and fun. So it's not like super, scary and keeps you up at night, but it's spooky enough that it's a perfect read for the spooky season right now. I also created a psychic spell spray for the first time ever. So go to moon.brews.podcast on Instagram to see how I made that. I have been reading again that psychic book, the Psychic Witch book by Matt Oron. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. I might be wrong on that, but it is teaching me so much about the mind and opening my mind's eye and the third eye. And I created a psychic spell spray that I just collected herbs from around the house that I had grown and that I had dried. And then I created that spell spray afterwards. And I've just been spraying it before I go into my meditative state or practice, and it kind of puts you in that mindset as well using your olfactory system. So go check that out if you haven't already. I just got out of the shower actually from decorating my outside. My front porch area outside. I started hanging up all my little ghouls and my witches, and I actually created my pet cemetery. I do have a pet cemetery. I love it. I have my tombstones out there, and I created it. And what is it? It's September. It's Maybon, basically. So happy Maybon as well. Autumn equinox is here. If you don't know that already, it's September 21st right now. So I'm so excited for spooky season. I have a big like scarecrow guy that like flies that I'm going to attach to the outside, but we have to hang out the window. So I need Joey's help to do that, or help me with that. But the last thing I wanted to say was that I did buy black obsidian in like a mirror form. So it's like a slate of it that's nice and shiny, and you can use it as a mirror. It's obviously very dark and black because it's black obsidian, but I bought it from my local apothecary and crystal shop, and I've never seen them have it before. And it is so unique, and I love it so much. It's sitting in front of me. It's this little tiny circle of a black obsidian, and you can, if you look into it, you can see yourself. It's a reflection, it's a mirror, so you can use it for scrying purposes. The lady that I bought it from said that it's good for your shadow work. You can scry into it. You can also, there was a gentleman there who was, obviously selling it to me a little bit, but he was knowledgeable in the fact that he taught me that if you close one eye and you hold up your black obsidian mirror up to your other eye, you can actually look directly at the sun. It's like those eclipse glasses, that you wear during eclipse season, so you can look at the eclipse that's happening with the sun. So it kind of gave off that, that vibe. And he actually taught me that the Mayans down in Mexico used black obsidian to create their Mayan calendar, because the Mayan calendar is associated with the sun and where it is. So they had a clock time, obviously, because that's how we do time, and days is with tracking the sun. So the Mayans did the same thing, but obviously technology back then, we didn't have the things that we have today, and they didn't have eclipse glasses back then. So they would use black obsidian to track the sun in the sky. And I think that is the coolest, most amazing thing ever. And I'm so excited to watch the next eclipse with my black obsidian mirror. Before we get into the Salem Witch Trials, please listen to an ad for Tea, Tales, and Talks.
Welcome to Tea, Tales, and Talks, where we talk about spooky things, drink some tea, and try not to get too scared. I'm Sarah, I'll be your host.
And I'm Mackenzie, I'll be your co-host.
For these strange and occasionally unsettling tales.
If you like spooky stuff, history, ghosts, ghouls, witches, and mysteries of this world and others, then Tea, Tales, and Talks might be the podcast for you. Join us for all the paranormal tea, haunted tales, and spooky talks. New episodes drop every Monday wherever you get your podcasts.
Until we meet again, our twitchy witchy friends, stay spooky and
don't let your tea get cold.
Okay, so let's get into it. So welcome witches to Moon Brews. The moon has brewed a very, very exciting trip in my future to Salem, Massachusetts. I'm actually heading down there in a few days. I don't know when I'll be able to, edit and post, but I am heading down very soon. And it only makes sense to me to dive into the lore, the hauntings, and the secrets of Salem, Massachusetts before my arrival. I am heading down to Salem with, I would say, my fellow coven and witches, and I'm so excited. It's going to be a blast. Go ahead and follow Moon Brews on socials, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm going to post so much Salem content. You're going to be so sick of it. It's going to be so cool, though. I'm so excited. We plan the people that I'm going down with to do EVP sessions. I kind of want to, dabble with my Ouija board and do maybe some video content with that and just a lot more. So please stay tuned for that. We're going to have a lot to post and to show. So stay tuned for spooky Salem content as we approach closer and closer to Halloween. Let's get into the history of Salem, Massachusetts first. So English colonists colonized Salem, Massachusetts in 1626. Prior to this, Salem was called Nomkeg by the local Native Americans that lived there, and this meant fishing place or eel land. But after colonization, not only did the English settlers take the land, they also renamed the city to Salem in 1629. Salem, a city surrounded by water, quickly became one of the most significant seaports in American history, acting as a port for trading. Not too long after colonization, the Salem Witch Trials began in 1692 and 1693, a dark time in American history where hearings and prosecutions occurred for those accused of witchcraft. This was a time where mass hysteria lingered in the air, people accused one another of witchcraft, and death and imprisonment occurred thereafter. Hundreds of people were accused of witchcraft during this time, and after the hearings and prosecutions, 20 of these individuals were sentenced to death. So why did this mass hysteria occur? Why was there ever witchcraft trials in Salem? Why did people really believe witches were among them? And this was due to a few reasons. So let's talk about religion first. At this time, the Puritan community was deeply religious and connected to God. And we know when you believe in a god, you also believe in the devil. The Puritans believed the devil walked among them, and this was believed after they witnessed things like natural disasters, disease outbreaks, and conflicts arising between the Native Americans and the colonists, all leading to believe this was the work of the devil, because back then we needed to just blame things on something, right? There had to be a reason for things. There wasn't necessarily there also wasn't science and fact, a lot of fact back then. So it was, what is this natural disaster? Well, it had to have been the work of the devil. It's not proven by the tectonic plates shifting and causing an earthquake, So let's talk about a reverend that may have caused the Salem witch trials to unravel into something unruly. Reverend Samuel Parris became minister of Salem in July of 1689. At this point, Salem had went through 3 ministers in a 6-year period, which was explained that this was a lot. And as Reverend Samuel Parris accepted his new position, he found himself in the middle of conflicts between Salem town and Salem village. And according to historyofmassachusetts.com, he did very little to de-escalate these conflicts, and may have been the person to blame for the start of the witch trials. Listen to this quote. Parris inflamed local rivalries by declaring that if there were witches, men and women in covenant with the devil, there are multitudes in New England. Quote. After 8 short months of being the minister of Salem in March of 1692, Parris was convinced that witches had infiltrated the churches and Salem congregation. He would then preach about this in his sermon to the people of Salem, therefore causing the start of hysteria of the townspeople. Paris preached this in a place where religion was practiced heavily and people truly feared the devil. These sayings during these sermons lead to powerful and dangerous tensions among his people. He quickly gained followers by encouraging villagers to, quote, purge their feelings of frustration and guilt by locating and destroying witches, quote. What a fucking statement. You're asking your townspeople to take their anger out on other townspeople. Paris was the definition of evil, in my opinion. He then gained pivotal following from the Putnam family, which helps his quote-unquote mission of ridding the witches. I'm going to talk about the Putnam family later in the show, but remember that name. So the beginning of the Salem Witch Trials. This started in the winter of 1692, when a few young girls started displaying odd and strange behavior, like expressing, quote, suffering fits, and complaining of being pinched by invisible forces, quote, and frankly, just acting like they were possessed. These girls were named Betty Harris, the daughter of Reverend Samuel Parris, and Abigail Williams, the niece of Reverend Samuel Parris. Do these last names ring a bell? Parris, the daughter and the niece of Reverend Parris. Of course, the girls who are being quote-unquote attacked by unseen forces, by witches, are related to fucking Reverend Parris. A local Salem doctor was called and could not determine what was wrong with the girls. So naturally, he concluded that the girls were both bewitched by witches. So this doc didn't really help the case either. If you're a doctor, you need to stand by science and facts. If the girls were displaying no evidence of any diseases, psychological issues, anything like that, then that's it, period, right? That's a fact. That was the fact. I do not have a diagnosis for these girls. Just because this doctor did not have a diagnosis, it did not give him the right to be like, oh yeah, they were bewitched, by the way. Like, what? Listen to this quote from historyofmass.com. Mr. Parris appears to have been much astonished when the physicians informed him that his daughter and niece were no doubt under an evil hand. There is evidence that Mr. Parris endeavored to keep the opinion of the physicians at secret, at least, till he could determine what course to pursue. At this time, Mary Sobley, a member of his church, gave directions to John Indian on how to find out who bewitched Betty Parris and Abigail Williams. This was done without the knowledge of Parris. The means used to make the discovery was to make a cake of rye meal with the urine of the children and bake it in the ashes and give it to a dog to eat. Similar disgusting practices appear to have been used to discover and kill witches during the whole period of delusion, quote. I had to read that like 3 or 4 times the first time I read it. I was like, what? What is this cake? And why is there child's urine in it? Like, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. So basically what this is saying is that Mary Sillaby, she was part of the church. She recommended using folklore magic to help identify who may have hexed and bewitched the girls, the daughter and the niece of Reverend Parris. And Mary instructed enslaved servants of Reverend Parris to do so. So, she's off the hook. So she's telling somebody else to do it, basically. And one of them was Tituba. She forced Tituba to make this witch's cake to identify who the witches were because she was the enslaved person of Reverend Parris. Of course you're going to force her to do it because if things go awry, you can just blame the slave. It's an easy way out for Mary. So basically the goal was to use magic in a witch's cake. This cake would hold the, quote, evil essence of the hexed girls because it contained their urine, which is disgusting. I'm not sure what's going on here. Then, feeding this cake to a dog's witch is familiar would reveal the witch after the dog would, quote, to be affected. This obviously did not work. But let's backtrack a little bit. Can we talk about how Mary literally performed folklore magic and everyone just looked away? Right? What about Mary? I mean, if she's actually practicing folklore magic and you're afraid of magic and witches, well, why? What's happening here? And the fact that they're using children's urine to bake a cake to find witches, like this is worse than the worst fictional book I've ever read. Like you'd be like, what is happening? You'd watch a movie of this and be like, why would that is nasty. That is like a low, like director, that was weird. I'm not sure why you added that in there. But this was real. This happened. What in the world was wrong with these people, these townspeople in Salem in 1692? Mary and Reverend Parris claimed that the cake revealed the truth, obviously. But we all know it's bullshit. They accused easy, lesser than, in their opinion, women to accuse. And these women were Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba. So let's get to know these ladies. So Sarah Good was born in 1653. She lived a low economic status life filled with poverty and debts. Near the time of her accusation of being a witch, she was considered a beggar and went door to door asking for food and shelter, which led people to believe that she was less than them. Another reason why, in my opinion, they all put the blame on her in being a witch. After this poor woman was already suffering in life. She was accused of being a witch after the cake incident. She always maintained her innocence, and she was sentenced to hanging on July 29th, 1692 at the age of 39 years old. Before she was hung, she told Reverend Nicholas Noyles, quote, "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink," quote. And to that I say, I hope Reverend Noyles got nothing but hell. So Sarah Osborne. Sarah Osborne was born in 1643. Her lifestyle was different from Sarah Good's. She first married Robert Prince, who unfortunately passed away, leaving her a widow. And later she ended up marrying a man named Alexander Osborne, an Irish immigrant. In attempts in taking her late husband's inheritance, the influential Putnam family viewed this as breaches of social and legal norms, therefore creating a conflict with them. Let's remember the Putnam family, looked up to and were quote-unquote friends with Reverend Parris and his twisted ideations of witches. To no surprise, Sarah Osborne was later accused of being a witch. Do you see the problem here? The power struggle is real. The Putnams used opinions and outside conflicts to accuse innocent women of being witches. Talk about a lack of emotional control and anger management issues. And deflection. Deflection to the highest degree. After being accused, she was sentenced to jail and passed away prior to execution on May 10th, 1692. The conditions of the jails and prisons were so bad that many believe this was why she passed in her cell. And Tituba. Tituba's birth year is unknown, but scholars believe she was born sometime between 1662 and 1674. She was a Native American woman who lived in the household of Reverend Parris as a slave. After the cake incident, Tituba was arrested on March 1st and actually confessed to being a witch, which led to even more mass hysteria in the town, as you could imagine, and started an even greater massive witch hunt. But before we get too far, let's get the facts straight on her confession. So this Native American woman was an enslaved servant in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris. Of course she confessed. She was enslaved by the man who started the witch hysteria in the first place. God only knows what happened to this poor woman behind closed doors before she confessed. In my opinion, Reverend Parris is like a literal sack of shit. She was spared the gallows, but still unfortunately sentenced to jail time. There came a point where Reverend Parris just wouldn't pay her jail fees anymore. So he wanted her to confess. She confessed, so then she was sentenced to prison. But then you have to pay, right? Like whoever you send, you have to then pay their dues to stay in prison. But then he was like, oh, I'm not paying anymore. So it's like, what was the point of accusing her as a witch? What? Like, what are you talking about? But eventually, an unknown person paid her jail fees and she disappeared from all historical records. In my fantasy world, I hope to believe that a real witch freed Tituba from her jail cell and set her free to live a life of freedom and peace. So let's take it back a notch to the Putnam family. So who is this Putnam family? They were a prominent, influential, wealthy family in Salem, Massachusetts. Wow, I would have never guessed. Historians believe the Putnam family exploited witchcraft and the hysteria associated with it to use it to their advantage in getting social and economic power. Anne Putnam accused women of being witches at the age of 12 years old, the daughter of the Putnams. She named more than 60 people who, according to her, were witches. Her father and her mother also played a huge role in the accusations. You now know why the Putnam family got along with Reverend Parris. After the trials concluded, the 12-year-old Anne Putnam confessed that she had been, quote, deluded by Satan, quote, and expressed her remorse for the lives lost during Salem. A 12-year-old Go back to elementary school. Think about all the kids who started rumors about you for attention at the age of 12. Now think about this rumor getting to your reverend of your town, and then he hangs you for it. How insane is that? They're taking the word of a 12-year-old. 12-year-olds are going to act like 12-year-olds, and the adults are just enabling the behavior by believing the things that are coming out of their mouths. Let's get into the accusations and later the executions. So back in 1692 Salem, you can be accused of being a witch by anyone, especially children that were 12 years old. And most of the time, you were being accused by a reverend, his followers, and wealthy families of Salem. Roughly 200 people were accused of witchcraft. What would happen after you were accused was an arrest. They would arrest you and place you into jail, an inhumane place riddled with disease. Then the trial happened, and this is where they tried to prove that you were a witch. The quote-unquote proof they would use was using the accused word against the accusers, so literal word of mouth. They would make the accused confess, and they would do this by torture, psychological coercion, and I'm sure so much more that ended up not being documented. And they would try to find physical proof of a witch by finding the quote witch's mark. And it's basically a beauty mark on your body. They believed this was the mark of the devil, and it ended up being a birthmark, beauty mark, or mole on your body. Take a look at your own freaking body. How unreal is that? And after the trial, the accused was either found guilty or not guilty. If someone confessed to being a witch after they were tortured, they would end up in jail in conditions unimaginable. If they were found guilty, they were executed. So let's get into the executions. 20 people were executed during the Salem Witch Trials of 1692. 19 of them were hanged and 1 was stoned to death. I am going to read the names of all 20 people that were executed during these witch trials because they deserve their name to be told. So hanged on June 10th, 1692 was Bridget Bishop. Hanged on July 19th, 1692, Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howell, Susan Martin, Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Wilds. Hanged on August 19th, 1692, George Burroughs, Martha Carrier, George Jacobs Sr., John Proctor, John Willard. Pressed to death on September 19th, 1692, was Giles Corey. He was a man in his 80s who refused to enter a plea deal of guilty or not guilty and was tortured to death by being slowly crushed by heavy stones. And he reportedly remained silent except for asking for, quote, more weight to end his suffering. Hanged on September 22nd, 1692, Martha Corey, Mary Easty, Alice Parker, Mary Parker, Anne Pedater, William Redd, Margaret Scott, Samuel Wardwell. Proctor's Ledge is the location where the executions occurred. And actually, what is super interesting was that in 2016, this was found out. So really not long ago at all. And centuries before this, people believed the executions occurred on a hill called Gallows Hill, but that's just incorrect. The accused would be loaded into a cart while the public watched and then transferred to Proctor's Ledge. It is then believed that victims were forced to climb a ladder, lace the noose around their necks, and then apparently the ladder was kicked from underneath, causing them to strangle to death, which is different from quote-unquote modern hanging, as victims in this instance, they kind of like fall a short distance with the noose, which ends up leading your neck to break. Before these people in Salem at this time, just a ladder was kicked underneath them, so they strangled instead. After death, victims were taken down and did not receive a proper burial. The false accusations, hate from the crowd, torture, and painful deaths must have created such a dark energy that is now stored in the soil at Proctor's Ledge. So the end of the trials. The Salem Witch Trials ended after a few events that had occurred, like the accusations of prominent people in Salem, Massachusetts. These individuals included the wife of Reverend John Healy and wife of Governor William Phipps. This caused even more outcry, as you can imagine, but the public then began to question the absurd accusations. Governor Phipps took the stand and ordered the Court of Oyer and Terminer to be shut down. They were the special court that would proceed with witchcraft hearing and cases. Reverend Increase Mather stated that the use of, quote, spectral evidence was basically fraudulent, and that you could not use invisible evidence, quote-unquote evidence, in the court of law to try and prove that someone is a witch. And to that, I say obviously. I'm not happy it took all these people's deaths for them to figure that out, that invisible evidence is not actually evidence. And by May of 1693, Governor Phips granted a pardon on all the other witches that were currently being accused. He apologized. This is important to note. The people of Salem did not necessarily stop believing in witches roaming around Salem. Rather, it was now just illegal to call someone a witch that you did not like and execute them for it. To this I say, the veil has closed on my covering of the Salem Witch Trials. I hope you learned as much as I did while I researched. It was a lot of fun, and I did learn a lot more things that I didn't know prior. I cannot wait to go to Salem and especially give my peace and love to the victims who were taken off this planet by pure evil. I think we all know who the true devil or devils were in Salem, Massachusetts of 1692.